Hi, everyone. I'm Christina, and with me today is Jorge Vásquez, who's a senior software engineer at Ziverge. So, Jorge, thank you so much for being here today and being part of this interview. So, for the sake of the audience, let's start with where you live right now and what you love about it.
Well, hi, Christina. Thank you for this interview. And well, I'm from Bolivia in South America. So nice to talk to you today.
Thank you. So, what would you say is your favorite thing about Bolivia?
Well, I like several things. Well, one of them is the food. I think there is several kinds of food we have here, so that's nice. Also, the weather. I think it's nice that we have different kinds of weather according to the city where we live here. For example, now it's winter, so it's a little cold, but not so much. I think there are colder places, so it's nice. And when you have summer, you also have hot temperatures. So nice having those that the opportunity of having those different seasons, so you can enjoy them.
Yeah, you have the variety, and then you can
Yeah,
enjoy the whole thing.
yeah.
Yeah, and what about the food? What's your favorite dish in Bolivia?
Oh, there are several. There is one here where I live. The name it's silpancho. So you have it has meat. It has you have fried eggs, and it has potatoes, rice. It has everything.
A lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. And here people eat very well. So the um, Cochabamba is the city where I live, and it's known like it's like the food capital of the country. So it's famous for that.
So you get
So
the
that's
best food.
nice.
You get all your nutrients.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And well, originally I'm from La Paz, the capital, and I'm living here since a very long time. But yeah, it's that was the nicest part of that, and that is the nicest part of living here. The food.
Oh, that's great. Well, then,
Yeah.
shifting gears a little bit, could you share a little bit about your story of how you started in programming and how that led to where you are today?
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's funny because originally my career, my major is not software engineering, it's telecommunications engineering. But well, I had a lot of software engineering preparation as well when I was studying. So I started my first work, actual job in programming was at a telco company here in the country. And yeah, we developed software for mobile networks, right? Like we had, well, we used SMS a lot that time, so we had an in-house SMS server. So I worked on that. We had the billing server also used for charging everything, right? Like your internet usage, your calls usage, everything. So I worked on that too. So that was interesting. We used Java there. It was like the first years of Java 8. So we migrated, we had applications in Java 6 and Java 7. We migrated some of them to Java 8. I remember that. So that was interesting.
And then that led you to getting into more functional programming to the point that you're now.
Yeah, that's that's interesting because well, my boss, he was also my teacher at university, and he once told me he was reading about a new programming language. It was Kotlin, and he told me, "Oh, this programming language looks nice. It's like a better Java, and you can take a look to it." And I started reading about that. It caught my attention, so I started taking a look at blogs and things like that, and that way I found about Scala because I hadn't heard about Scala before. Uh, and I when I was reading about that, I realized it had nice functional programming features. So that really caught my attention because, well, I already knew about functional programming in university. I learned about that. But it was with Haskell. And well, I didn't know at that time how to really apply functional programming in the real world, right? So I knew some stuff, but it was like more in an academic way. So, well, looking at Scala, that was a language that you can interact with Java and had functional programming features. So, well, I decided to learn Scala. So I left Kotlin aside and I started learning about Scala. I gave some courses there in the company, also to my coworkers, and at university I was also teaching in university at that time. So I gave some courses about Scala. So yeah, that's how I got to know about Scala. That time there wasn't Zio or stuff like that. Years later, I discovered about Zio, looking at some talks by John DeGoes in YouTube. So, and that was because I was still looking for how to apply functional programming in real life because Scala had some nice features, but it was like I didn't know how to apply the whole functional programming, the whole application, right? There was like some ideas I had that I can apply functional programming in these parts of the code, but everything was still object oriented. And John had these talks about how to apply in a big way, right? So, and that's how I discovered about Zio. And well, after that, I started looking more info about Zio. It was a new library at that time. It was like 2018, 2019, I think. And well, John started giving some courses and I started taking them. So I really learned Zio. And yeah, that's why I'm here today, basically.
That's awesome. I'm curious because you mentioned that you learned about Scala in theory first, and then you learned about the real life applications. So what would you say is like the first real life application of Scala that you were like, oh, this is really cool?
Yeah, well, the first one I applied myself was a REST API with GraphQL. So I was able to implement that by myself, right? It was like a toy project initially. And it was nice because it was the first time like I could really apply these ideas to the whole application. There wasn't Zio HTTP at that time, so I used HTTP4S, I remember, combined with Zio. So that was nice. And I was able to create tests and everything. So yeah, that was really exciting. And after that, I was able to change job. Well, at that time, I wasn't working at the telco company where I mentioned. I was working already for another company, software development company here. But there I used everything. I used Java, Python, Node.js. I used Scala also, but it was with Spark, and it wasn't functional programming. And well, after that, I was learning Zio, being able to implement this thing with HTTP4S. I was able to get my first jobs using functional programming all the time. So yeah, and well, there in the companies that I worked, well, now I'm working for a streaming company. Before it was also some companies related to that. And well, now I'm able to use Zio for big companies. So that's nice.
Yeah. And what would you say is some of the hardest technical or social challenges that you've faced on your way to being a senior software engineer?
Yeah, yeah. I think well, there is a lot of things I had to learn about, right? Like I was mentioning, like um, several programming languages that I had to learn these years. Um, well, it was interesting that well before working with Scala, there were times like I had a new project, right? And in that project, they didn't use Java, and the project manager told me, well, you have to learn like Node.js for tomorrow, and I had to do it, right? That was interesting because I wasn't very comfortable at that time working with that because well, I hadn't never used Node.js in production, for example. So I knew about JavaScript, right? But I hadn't applied it to the backend before, so I had to learn about it and performance and stuff like that. But I did it, so that was nice. I also took the chance to learn TypeScript at that time. I remember because well, we had the code base. There was already a code base written with Node.js and JavaScript, but I didn't like that it was a dynamic language. So it was really easy to mess up with things. So I knew TypeScript existed, right? So I told the guy, the PM, well, I think we should use TypeScript for this thing because, well, you get nice errors at compile time. You avoid having these awful runtime errors that sometimes happen. So why we don't introduce it to the project, at least to the backend?
Mm-hmm.
And well, he liked the idea, and I started with it, and it was nice because after that, the team also started learning about TypeScript for the backend, and we discovered some weird issues that happened at runtime before. Now they happened at compile time, so that was nice. Um, Also, I remember, well, I mentioned I worked with Scala and Spark before, writing another project I had, but they used PySpark at that time, so with Python instead of Scala. And it was nice because I was able to convince the team to use Scala instead of Python. Also, with similar arguments like detecting errors at compile time and things like that. Um, what else? Yeah, I think another nice thing is like always trying to improve code, right? Like striving for perfection in your day-to-day job, like refactoring. I'm like obsessed with refactoring code, right? I sometimes I read some code and it hurts your eyes, right? It's not easy to read, and being able to discuss about that with teammates, like, well, maybe we can use this thing to simplify code or to making it look nice. I like to have those that kind of discussions as well, like keeping improving the code. I think that's also a nice quality that seniors should have, like looking that looking for that perfection always.
Yeah, and I found it interesting that you mentioned like some clients will use, like, for example, you had Scala, but they preferred Node.js, and then in different situations, something else. So right now in 2024, what would you say is like something that you've been hearing about or like is very hot right now?
Yeah. Well, right now I'm learning about Rust as well because I think Rust is a well, it's not very popular language, right? It's like a more niche language, but I think it's getting more popular these days. Uh, syntax-wise, comparing with Scala, I think Scala has a nicer syntax than Rust. But Rust has very nice performance, for example. So if you are looking for a very, very, very performant application, well, you should use Rust, right? And another nice thing is the safety of the language, right? Before, in this telco company I've mentioned, I also used C++. And well, we needed to use C++ because there was some libraries that we needed to use to interact with the mobile networks, like the 3G and 4G networks, and that there were some vendor libraries, and those libraries were written in C++. So we needed to use C++ to interact with that, and it was a real headache. I remember the well, we had this initial implementation, right? And we tested it working with real cell phones, right? We had these very weird errors, and those errors were because of memory management issues. Like we forgot to, well, we deleted some part of the memory at one part of the application, and there was another part that was trying to access that memory section, but that was already deleted, right? But
Oh no.
the compiler doesn't tell you anything about that, right? And you discover that like just by testing, and once you test, you had to find where in the code was the problem. It was very hard. But with Rust, that kind of things can't happen because the compiler tells you, the compiler doesn't let you do that kind of stuff. So C++ and Rust are low-level languages, right? They are they are closer to the hardware of the server, but Rust is a lot safer. So that's another thing that caught my attention, right? Like the problem with Scala or any other languages that are JVM based is the performance, right? You never get as good a performance as good as with C or C++, right? But you have a lot of safety, right? So that is one of the nice features of Java or Scala, these languages, that you don't have to interact with this low-level memory management, right? And you have automatic garbage collection. So you forget about that. So that's nice.
Yeah.
But you lose performance, right? And with Rust, well, again, you have to deal with low-level stuff, but you have safety and you have all the performance. So that's very nice. Another language that I'm keeping my eye on these days is Rock. It's a very new language by Richard Feldman. He has given some nice courses about Elm before. That's a functional language, but for the front end. And the experience of that language is very, very nice. You have this very detailed compiler messages, very great, but it's just for the front end, right? And Richard Feldman wanted something similar for the backend, right? So now he's creating this language that has some very interesting features and is functional as well. And it has full types safety, it has type inference. So you look at the code and it's very similar to languages like Ruby or maybe Python, where you don't have these type annotations and stuff, but it has types. So you can add your type annotations and stuff, but you don't need it. So the code looks very, very nice. And it's in early stages, but I see you can already create HTTP servers with that and command line interfaces. So that's another language I'm very, very interested on. So yeah.
You mentioned a lot of languages. If you were to pick one for someone that's like just starting out, what would be the first programming language that you would recommend someone learning?
Yeah, the very, very first, I think, yeah, that's always hard when they ask me that. But well, I love Scala, so I'd like people to start learning Scala first. But I've also been a teacher at university, and I know that's a little hard sometimes because Scala has a lot of nice features, and it can be intimidating. So I'd say Python. I think Python it's a nice language to start with, uh, and then you can learn other languages. So the advantage of Python, well, it's dynamic, so you don't have all these compile time guarantees that you have with Scala or other languages, compiled languages, right?
Yeah.
But the syntax is so nice. So I think for new programmers, Python is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I surely I wouldn't recommend Rust for beginning because it's complex, but yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna make you the question even harder now. What would you say is your favorite programming language and why?
Scala.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. That's not complex. Yeah, Scala is my favorite one, and yeah, why? Because of functional programming, right? I liked Haskell, for example. I also like Haskell, but the problem with Haskell is that it's purely functional, right? So, and it's very hard to convince people to use it in real life because, well, Haskell it's being used more for academic things, and it uses very um, specialized jargon for things, right? Like you see people talking about functors and applicatives and monads, and when you start learning about Haskell, that can be very intimidating. And also, I think another problem with Haskell is that tooling is not very developer friendly, right? So if you work in a company and if you try to convince people, well, you should use Haskell, uh, it will be very difficult because, well, on one side you have this very technical stuff that is scary, and you have tools that are not so good, I think. And in Scala, we have the possibility to still use things from object-oriented programming. In Haskell, we don't have that option, right? So you can convince people from from that part, right? You can still use the things you know from object-oriented programming. You can interact with Java libraries. So I think that's another very nice feature. So all the libraries you know from Java, you can still use them in Scala, right? The syntax I think is nicer than in Java. Um, and well, you have libraries like Zio that allow you to, well, there's also cats and Monix. So you have several libraries to choose from if you like functional programming. And well, in my case, I'd say especially Zio because I think it's the library that has, well, that's my personal opinion, but I think it's the library that has used all these object-oriented and functional features from the language in a nicer way, right? So you have like the best of both worlds in Zio, I think. So that's nice, and I haven't found that combination in any other language. I
Language.
think, yeah, yeah. Rust is also interesting, but you have to go again to be a more imperative programming. Uh, you have to be a more imperative programmer in that
Yeah.
language again. So yeah, the best combination I think it's for language features Scala, but for performance it will be Rust.
Okay. That was a good answer. And also in the spirit of helping out people that are just starting out, what advice would you give a junior engineer, for example, who wants to get to your level, a senior software engineer?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is like keep learning, right? All the time. Like I'm learning new stuff every day. Literally, I'm taking always courses. I'm reading books, and that never stops. Uh, I also try to learn things that I don't feel very comfortable with in the beginning, right? So it's like always trying to stretch your mind, right? Like looking for new horizons. Like it's like when I knew about Java or C++, I was learning about Scala. Or Haskell, when I knew about Scala, I started learning about Rust. Now I'm learning about Rock. It's like,
Never ending.
yeah, never ending, right? I think that's very important. Always like being curious about what new things you can learn.
Yeah. And now that you're at Ziverge, what would you say is like the number one reason to encourage programmers to join Ziverge?
Yeah, well, what was the reason I joined Cybert, for instance, is that I know here there is very, very smart people. Well, starting with John, right? And there is also, we have people like Daniel Vygotsky from Golem. We also have Afsal, and there is also other nice people that have given talks. So they are very known speakers in the Scala community, now also in Golem. So you can learn from them, right? Also, we have nice projects like if you are a Scala programmer, we have projects with Zio, right? That's nice that we can apply Zio in our everyday job here. That's something that maybe other companies don't have. And well, also now there is nice opportunities to work with Rust and TypeScript and stuff like that. So yeah, I think we have very nice opportunities there. And also I like the people we have here. Like we have a nice working space. Also being able to work remotely, and that's very nice, I think.
Yeah. So you've given a lot of advice throughout the interview. So I'm just going to ask you for one final piece of advice to any programmers looking to improve and then grow to their full potential.
Yeah, well, as I was mentioning, learning new stuff every day. But the other advice I think would be like trying to contribute to open source, right? That's the other thing I've been able to do these past years, like working with John, adding some stuff to Zio or Zio Prelude, for example, in my case. And in Zio, I think there is a lot of opportunities to contribute, right? And that gives you new perspectives, right? Because, well, you're able to work with very smart people that have previously contributed to Zio, and you start to understand their design decisions, for example, for Zio, and you see some very advanced patterns, functional programming applied to Zio in real life. So you learn about that, or you learn about some complex stuff about the Scala language itself, for instance. And the same applies to contributing to other projects, not just Zio or Scala, right? You can contribute, for example, for Golem if you want to learn more about Rust or about WebAssembly, for instance, or you can contribute to other projects in TypeScript or Python. I don't know, but in any case, that will always give you some nice perspectives. And I also think that's nice for job seeking, right? Because it's nice that you can add to your resume that, well, I've been able to contribute to this open source project, right? And you have something to show. So yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Jorge, for your time. Really appreciate you sharing your insight for your story, as well as how to help people grow to the stage that you're now. So thanks again for your time and for your insight. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. And well, thank you for this nice interview. And well, see you again soon.